Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for The Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. Today's image was submitted by Clive, who's an advanced photographer from the UK. Clive said he was part of a group photo shoot from an online community, and this is Bill, who came all the way from Ohio in the United States to be a part of this group shoot. And he said after shooting some other things, they sat down to have dinner, and Clive had the opportunity to try a Lensbaby composer on his 5D, and he took this shot of Bill and said he took several shots and this was his favorite. So this was shot on a Canon 5D full frame sensor camera, Lensbaby composer at f2, that's wide open on that lens, and at ISO 800 it exposed the file for an 80th of a second. Really neat portrait. And just real quick about the Lensbaby, this is one of the cool things about the Lensbaby. You're in this situation where you're having dinner, it looks like it's outside, and there's a lot going on in the background. And the Lensbaby is a specialty lens, and it's a selective focus lens. So you have a 50mm lens here that without any aperture rings is a real sort of funky system of setting your aperture, which is rings that sit on top of the front element. Magnets hold those aperture rings on the front element. Without any of the rings in, the Lensbaby composer is an f2 lens. So we're getting shallow depth of field here because Clive is pretty close to his subject and he's shooting wide open on a fast lens, but in addition to that, the Lensbaby's front element is warped and there's just a sweet spot of focus in the middle, and then it gets very distorted in addition to the shallow depth of field here on the edges. And you're seeing that distortion. You can see it in the elliptical bokeh. The reason this bokeh is elliptical and seems to point towards the middle of the frame is because of that warping of the lens. I love the Lensbaby for impromptu portraits. And so much of my street photography is either done with the Lensbaby or I try to use the Lensbaby. And tomorrow I'm going to get into that a little bit. I talked about doing another self-critique where I talk a little bit about approach, and I'm going to do that tomorrow. So we'll continue on with this idea of portraits, and then for those of you that love landscapes, go ahead and tell you now the photo of the week on Friday is an absolutely just jaw-dropping, mind-stopping landscape image that we'll be looking at. One of the things that is interesting to me about this image is just some of these overall sort of shapes in the background. There's a little bit of a feeling of formal symmetry with these squares, and Bill is very squared up, so his torso is sort of making this square shape. And you do have this sort of design that sets up that's real, it's broken up by all the distortion of the Lensbaby, but it's sort of real graphic. And I've outlined it here. You know, and one of the things that I've been talking about when we're looking at composition is sort of doing this, trying to look at the image in different ways. And one of the ways to look at it is in sort of a bare bones kind of structure kind of a way. And so it's really interesting. Even with all this stuff going on, I like the way this has been framed based on these shapes, with Bill just sitting here looking straight at us and showing up in the image in a very much of a formally symmetrical kind of a way. I think that works well. I'm going to talk in just a minute about possibly changing the color around. Color's definitely very exciting here. One interesting thing about color is there's a lot of colors happening back here in the background, and Bill is obviously wearing some kind of very colorful shirt. Maybe looks like a rock group or something here, I don't know. And these colors are playing off of each other in a way that's very, very interesting. And the fact that Bill isn't quite looking at the camera here, that can be really powerful. Cinema has sort of trained us to feel a certain way about this kind of an image, where the portrait subject is seemingly not aware of the camera, and that has a different psychological impact on us. One of the things I'm always trying to do when I'm shooting portraits is to get variations where the person is looking into the camera and looking away from the camera, just one type of variation. The other thing that I want to say is that Lensbaby, there's a learning curve with it, and when you shoot it wide open, like Clive is here, when you combine that small sweet spot of focus with very, very shallow depth of field, it can get pretty difficult when you're just starting to use it to get things sharp. And so one of the things that I would say that Clive has done a beautiful job of here is getting sharpness right here in the face, and he's composed this in a way where it's making it easier for him to do that. He's pulled back a little bit. you have a small sweet spot of focus. You can imagine if he comes in and tries to do a really tight portrait of Bill's head, the sweet spot of focus won't even be able to cover both of his eyes with no aperture ring in there. When I shoot with the Lensbaby, most of the time I shoot with the f4 aperture ring on a full sensor camera. On a crop factor camera like my 50D, I would use the f2.8 aperture ring. But a lot of my Lensbaby shots, I will get back a little bit, and I will create a composition where the person's face can fit within that sweet spot of focus. Just something to think about. When I think about perfect world improvement for this image, again, I really think about the idea of hands, and I just want to kind of keep driving this point home. You know, it would be really cool if Bill could have brought his hands together here and raised them up, and he's making some kind of gesture down here, and there's negative space that comes around that. And, you know, maybe we pull back even a little bit more, or pan down a little bit. The thing about that is that it would sort of complete a circle down here, and it would create another layer of the story. Right now there's sort of two layers. There's Bill, and then there's the background information, and that can be a little bit static if we're trying to create the feeling of moving through the image. And just like rule of thirds says that, you know, 3 things are typically more dynamic than 2, because you can divide those in half. Same thing is true when we're layering pictures, and I will think about that, and I do really think a lot of times about near, middle, and far. Even in my people photography, I'll almost think like a landscape photographer. What's something I can frame this with that will give the suggestion of something near, then the person, and then the background, and play depth of field in a way where it's soft, sharp, and then soft again. And we could have that here with the hands, just suggesting the hands. Something is happening here with a short sleeve shirt too. These highlights of just the arms are a little bit distracting for me in the bottom of the frame. If you look at the bottom balance with the top balance, these ideas are not going very well with this sort of simple end at the top of the frame. And just something to think about. Something else I'll say here real quick is a technique that I use with the Lensbaby. Let's say that I was going to have the hands here and I didn't want them to be totally distorted and really whacked out. I would shoot one quick frame where I bent the lens down and focus closer to the hands, and once I had that, then I would keep shooting Bill's face, and I could blend those. One of the really cool things about the Lensbaby, and we're going to look at this tomorrow in my self-critique, is that because you have these distortions, it becomes easy to do these split focus composites, or becomes easier to do them relative to shooting with a normal lens. One of the first things I would do to this is I'd crop it, and that would be my crop. And one of the next things that I would do is I would remove this. It's sort of blocking the energy up here, and it's coming out of Bill's head, and so I did that. And then one thing that I think quite a bit about is trying to frame my subjects in a way where they can be contained and the eye will slow down a little bit more. One of the things that's happening for me here is I zoom past Bill because there's not a too great of a frame right now around his face to stop me from zooming past. And we're really now talking about post-production kind of work or digital darkroom kind of work. So here's what I'm talking about. Just going to come in. It's definitely giving a very different feel to Bill, and so that might not work. But if I'm just thinking about slowing the eye down, creating a framing, not only around him, but out here, around the edge of the frame, starts to create more of a feeling of this is a subject and then this is a subject, so on and so forth. Something else that I'll say here is this is another area that I might consider cloning out, this kind of blocking energy in the same way this was up here. A little bit more complicated to do that, and I didn't take the time to do it. Just going to come back to really where we were yesterday. So 2 portraits that are real similar. Even though the colors here are sort of exciting and everything, when you get this many different colors, you're bound to have some color clashing. And you're getting that in here. Sort of pink and orange can really clash with each other. You even have that in the shirt, but then it repeats back in the background. And I just start to get overwhelmed. If I think about this image in black and white, I say, you know, if I get rid of all the color, the shapes of the faces here on the t-shirt and the bokeh back here, those things are rhyming really well if we take the overlay of color away. And to me, this just works so much better in black and white. You know, black and white is just easier than color by a magnitude of I don't even know what. I mean, I would much rather shoot in black and white all the time because color is so damn complicated, and it's one of the most difficult things to get your mind around to me in the visual arts. And in situations like this where I had all that color back there, you know, in a perfect world, what I would think is, God, I wish I had a selection of t-shirts. And is there a way to pick a color here, long sleeve shirt, that would harmonize or complement one of these dominant ideas in the background? But there's so many different colors back here that might not even work. Here I might sort of, if I was thinking about color, be looking for a different background. And so much of the time when I'm thinking color and I'm shooting street portraits, I'll have backgrounds sort of in an area where I'll try and walk somebody over to it. I'm already thinking about harmony and complement of color, but mainly what I'm thinking about is how can I cut down on the number of colors. And I do end up liking this in black and white. I mean, there's I think the green channel, and I think there's the blue channel. They're both pretty interesting, and there are all kinds of other ways to convert this. Great job here by Clive, just using the Lensbaby for the first time. Really great portrait of his friend Bill, and want to say a big thank you to you for being here on the Mindful Eyes Daily Critique.